Hello. So I wanted to share with you how my approach to my food blog has changed throughout the pandemic. Because obviously, the restaurant industry has been profoundly impacted by what's happened, and it's been absolutely tragic to see restaurants close and so many restaurant employees and people just in the service industry in general be exploited. And just be expected to put their health and their life at risk for the economy. So initially, my approach to my food blog, Chai Veg, was to consider how one can be an ethical foodie, and specifically in Chicago. So, what restaurants are available to plant-based eaters who are trying to do it as a way of eating ethically? And then also, I wanted to share my vegetarian and vegan recipes since I love cooking and I've been doing it for like 13 years at this point. So I have a lot of experience with it. But of course, I'm not a chef. I'm not trained or anything like that. It's just something I learned on my own. And throughout the pandemic, right, especially during the first few months, like as restaurants were closed or there was takeout only, I definitely shifted my approach to focus more on my cooking and my recipes. And I also was at home more, so I had more time to develop recipes. And so my approach to cooking, I'm not, setting up amazing photo shoots with my food that takes 3 hours with like beautiful napkins and like food sprinkled throughout. That's really not what I want to be doing with my blog or with my time, even though I appreciate the people who do that, but that's not something I really vibe with. And the way I cook is, it's usually on a weeknight after a full work day when I'm tired, but I need to eat. And I don't really have time to set up a beautiful photo studio for it. So I'm just taking photos as I'm cooking. I'm cooking and taking the photos at the same time. And I ended up posting a lot more in my Instagram stories about my cooking process. I also decided I had some opportunities to do some cooking demos, which was really fun with some PR companies and like various companies that were showing these cooking demos to their employees. So those were some really great opportunities, and just showing that, hey, you can cook at home, you can cook healthy, and it doesn't have to take 5 hours, right? Because who has 5 hours? I don't want to spend 5 hours cooking. At least most of the time I don't want to do that. So my approach to cooking is plant-based, vegetarian, vegan on weeknights. And so I really focused on that throughout this pandemic and really wanted to bring that out more on my blog. I also wanted to use my blog more as a service to people who are plant-based eaters in Chicago, since that's where I live. And I came up with some lists of like vegetarian, vegan delivery takeout options because mainstream food publications aren't really veg friendly. And so I wanted to show, hey, this is the research that I've done, reading these takeout menus, also eating myself, and these are some really great options. I also used to review restaurants, and I was perhaps a bit more like honest or critical about it. But then during the pandemic, it felt really unethical to do that. There were a few restaurants that opened up during the pandemic, and they had some patio dining in the summer that felt safe enough for me, at least. So I did like post like 2 reviews throughout the past year, just showing like, hey, these restaurants are amazing, their food's amazing, and they're safe, relatively safe. At least everything's risky, but it's much lower risk to eat outside in a patio when people are spread apart. But before I would indicate if like there was something bad about a restaurant or if I was disappointed about something. But now with the pandemic, with the restaurants, I only focused on like, hey, this was an excellent restaurant and I'm going to share it. Whereas before I would post even if I had a negative experience or, a lukewarm experience. So that's kind of been my approach. And also with my Instagram account that's related to my food account. Of course, I think the idea of being an ethical foodie is innately political, right? Because of the factory farming industry, because of animal rights, because of the environment, which has been politicized, unfortunately. But at the same time, I also think with the Black Lives Matter movement and with, an increase in awareness of racial injustice, I feel like before I was scared to post things that were viewed as political because some people look at food because it's an escape from reality, and I get that. But I also think that this pandemic time was an opportunity to also convey like, hey, this is how restaurant workers are being dealt with. Hey, here are some Black or African-owned businesses to support, or women of color businesses to support. And just seeing other people doing that and then doing that myself with like in my stories, for example, or just kind of sharing some posts, I think has made my Instagram and just my food blog a bit fuller. I initially started my vegetarian food blog not as something that was lighter, because what I do with philosophy, with teaching it and writing it, can feel really heavy. So I'm still doing that, but I think with Instagram, it's like, as someone who's a very micro influencer, and I hate the word influencer, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of what I'm doing, right? I still have a platform to make a positive impact. And so that's what I'm trying to do, not just through animal rights, but also thinking about racial justice, which has been important to me for a long time before the summer of 2020. But of course, I think there's no excuse to not post about it or to not engage with it anymore, because there are so many more organizations now and there's so many more platforms for that. So that's kind of how my approach to my food blog has changed over the past year with the pandemic, with increasing my recipes and with at least sharing more kind of racial and gender justice issues in my stories and on my posts and things like that, but at the same time maintaining the focus of it being a vegetarian food blog for the animals.